Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to go out of my way to review another episode of Yellowstone. So this, of course, is episode 9, if you couldn't tell by the title and a number of other things. One thing that I want to let everybody know, if they've gone on and watched all this stuff in this series and whichever, it seems that there are some technical Yellowstone spin-offs, technically. 1883 is a Yellowstone story, hence why we have Travis, who is going on and talking about Roadhouse and Sam Elliott, and it's kind of like a little tip of the hat to that show that's going to be spun off here. And we seem to, within this season, are going to have the Sixes, like they're going to get their supposed spin-off also, whether it be with Jimmy or possibly without Jimmy. I'm assuming what's possibly going to happen with Jimmy is he might be maybe in the early stages of that show as a transitional character, like think of it possibly as like kind of thing where this character is just seemingly going to be on the show, and then maybe he will go on to eventually be back on Yellowstone, or maybe there's going to be some cross promotion going on here, maybe with Jimmy. Who knows? That would be a lot to just be for one guy, but like there might be some they might be trying to intertwine some of these shows, because that's what a lot of that's what the Arrowverse did. Eventually, just commingled a lot of stuff together. Like, hey guys, watch this other show. Whatever. But we have Jimmy in this episode. He's going on, and I want to say that I don't know all technical stuff of this show. So if I'm to say this is a horse show or something like that, and it's oh no, this is a contest, this is a tournament, this is a whatever, and I don't know the technical name of whatever this thing is that Jimmy is at, and they probably had said it in the episode somewhere, then my apologies, but I would call this a horse show just because there's no bull, there's no whatever. But we also have a Dances with Wolves kind of reference here. If anybody is to ever see the Kevin Costner film Dances with Wolves, I felt very much like the thing that they talk about in this episode was man, this kind of weirdly feels like they're referencing Dances with Wolves here, when John is going on and talking to Carter about Buffalo Valley. For some odd reason, it just feels familiar. So we go on and we have Beth that is again on this downward spiral of something, and it feels like her life is just going to blow up in her face. And I don't want that to happen. We've already technically had something already blow up somewhere in the vicinity of her bate, but we also have Beth going on and doing something really good here. She is to go and tell her father, it's why haven't you gone after the person that has scarred me for life? You for not bothering to go after this person who is to almost kill everybody in this family, with the weird thought of it, of course, not being Jamie. They still haven't come ahead to that. They still haven't gone into that. Speaking of Jamie, we have some interesting dialogue exchange between Jamie and Christina in this episode. And we have Garrett, who's kind of really starting to spread his wings a little bit more, not have to attach himself completely to just the Jamie story. And that's kind of nice here for a little bit. But We also have other like Casey is to have this kind of like soul searching kind of story, which kind of it kind of feels weak. Like I get it, they're still trying to like continue to figure out like how to like, just continue to have Rainwater and Mo just in this story with this group, and so they have to continue to figure out how they're going to approach that, how they're going to do that, and so this story is to just come up and I'm like, man, like I remember when like Casey had like the really cool stories because he was so focused in this show, it was ridiculous. Now like the stories that they have him in, I'm like I'm honestly like I'm interested, but like I'm just like there's other things going on. There's other kind of bigger stories going on than him, and I like that. I can enjoy that because we had so much of him focused in the early years, in the early seasons. Um, so I honestly can't complain about that because look at any of the other episodes where I'm like, man, this Casey guy, there's a lot of Casey in this show. So I can't complain about it now when they're shortening up this character and giving a more evened up like thing. But there's also way too many stories to just kind of like even everything out. But there's like, man, there's a lot of effort having to put on for an episode. There's so much to cover in one fell swoop of a thing, and like like good like good work for everybody who's working on this show because there's so much to do in so little time. Which is what is it like 50 some odd minutes of a show that eventually probably takes like a week or more to eventually do supposedly, because like they could have easily taped like half of the season or more, like and then kind of take their time kind of looking at some locations and stuff like that. So anyways, let's go out of our way to go into because I'll talk about everything else. Summer has a big story here, a big enough story to eventually be tied into the Beth story of things. And so, yeah, a pretty compelling episode. Really enjoy it. We have like one episode left to the season, and I'm like, where's the huge cliffhanger for the end of this episode? It doesn't feel like there is technically a cliffhanger, but not a big enough cliffhanger where you're like, oh my god, like how is this gonna just like make me go like, God, now I need to wait X amount of whatever to see the aftermath of this. Which even the last season finale, I really wasn't all that like. Man, I really need to see. Like I kind of knew, I kind of could figure that out, but. Let's go into it. Let's go into that double five, because it's otherwise that time yet again to go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get you spoil this episode. So let's honestly just kind of like let's get the Casey stuff out of the way. Like the very beginning of this episode is, of course, for I feel like this is a John and Beth opening of this episode. Uh, but we'll go into what I was going with. So Casey is to, of course, be talking to Rainwater and Mo, and it seems there are consistent times where everything that's happening for Casey has some wolf tied, entangled, some kind of something. And so we have Casey who's saying that every time something's happening for his life, like the livestock commissioner, his wife being pregnant, and all kinds of rungs of life, all of a sudden there's always this wolf there, weirdly. So Mo is going on telling Casey that, well, like, the reason for that is the wolf is your spirit animal. And so, like, that's why it's always there. So they go on and they tell Casey that he needs to go through this soul searching spiritual ceremony that is going to take 4 days, and he's not going to eat or drink for those 4 days and be on the just edge of death to then be able to figure out what this all means, like what he is to eventually come through with this. So I was like, okay, that's like really interesting. Like Mois mentioned that he's gonna have to go through this kind of spiritual cry kind of thing, and so Mo is to say that Monica knows how to do this and Mo knows how to do this. And so whenever Casey's ready, and Casey's like, yeah, I'm ready. So they go on and they put together some like makeshift tent. Uh, they go on and they have him kind of out in the woods somewhere. And they go on and have this, uh, of course, bull skull, and Mo is kind of carrying this on his back, and I'm like, man, that like I wish there would have been some kind of like cooler visual on that show of the bull's like skull. I probably would have taken that as a thumbnail, but like there was only one good like chance at that, and I was like, oh well. So we end up having Casey talking to Monica and Tate before he goes off. And Monica is telling Casey, like, whatever he tells you to do it. Just kind of follow what he has to say. And Casey's like, okay, that sounds good. So they kind of surround him in this traditional uh, traditional setup, and are to say like, all right, like see you in 4 days. And so he's like, well, how am I gonna know like that I'm done? How am I gonna know that I, of course, can like have seen something? And like really, it's just Casey figuring that out for himself. So I'm kind of wondering if the next episode is gonna be like 4 days later or something. That would be my question. Maybe like whatever they cover has to probably be 4 days later from whatever this episode is. So yeah, that's kind of just the Casey thing. It's simple enough. So we had the one moment where also Casey was going on and mentioning like all those 4 times, and then Rainwater was like, well, hey, like what were you doing during those times? And Casey's like, I'll plead the fifth on that, because there were some times where he of course was um like getting busy with his wife, getting really busy. So he was viciously busy. Anyways, so let's go on to. I think I might cover the Dutton stuff. The Dutton stuff. I'll cover the John stuff last, because that has like a big, massive thing. It ties into Beth. It has the summer thing in it, and there's a lot of tying in there. I think I'll get into the smaller stuff, and then I'll go and chomp at the bit for that John story. Because I think the beginning of this episode has John go and teach Carter how to ride a horse. Like I was thinking, I'm like, how exactly does this episode start? And I think it's with John and Carter riding the horse. So I think I won't cover the Jamie stuff. I think I'll cover the Jimmy stuff. Let's go and cover him. That sounded weird. Jimmy, of course, is to have things with Emily like going like breathing, like it's easy. And so we have Jimmy and we have Emily just kind of snuggling together with seemingly both of them not having upper uh, clothes on, upper clothes, shirts on. So they're laying in this like I want to say it's like sleeping bag or something like that, but it looks like it's just sheets like outside, and they're just kind of staring out into the stars. And so we have Emily in this conversation telling Jimmy that or she's asking Jimmy, how is it that she is different from the barrel racer? Jimmy goes on and mentions that Mia, or Mia? Mia, yeah. Because I always said Maya for some reason. Jimmy said Mia was to only like Jimmy for the potential of him and maybe not actually him, where Emily is to possibly much more like him than the like, oh, what am I going to get out of Jimmy? Like, how am I going to be able to fix this guy or change this guy or whatever? Or kind of like Christina. Like, Christina is going and looking at Jamie, and she's looking at him and like, how can I mold this guy? Like, how can I sculpt him the man I want him to be? Kind of thing, instead of the man he already is. Interesting enough. So we eventually have it where Jimmy, the next day, is to go on to this horse show, and he's helping out, and he's going on and kind of spinning certain horses and spinning them back. And so we kind of have really seen how, like, I don't like to use this because, like, Jimmy is a grown ASS man. Um, but it seems like this character has technically grown up here. Where he is already technically, like, he's grown, but, like, I'm just saying that he has drastically changed from who he was to be this new Jimmy. And that is the thing that I want to say here. Not grown up, but has drastically changed to be a different person. Where it seems like he is to be, instead of the guy that everyone is to give crap to, he instead is to be the guy that everyone is to kind of look at, of like, oh yeah, like, let's send that guy. Like, he's that guy now, where it's like, yeah, definitely send that guy, because like he'll work out well. So Jimmy is going on and doing this, doing some things for these guys, helping out the sixes to go on and do um, put out these horses, put out these shows. So all of a sudden we have Jimmy, who is seeing Travis go and do his thing. And so Jimmy goes off and tries to find Travis, to just kind of having this like reminiscing like moment of like, hey, here's who I am now. And Travis is just like, well, hey, like, yeah, like, I guess like you turned into a real cowboy because you're not going to be anything else. And so Travis is basically telling Jimmy now that he's graduated, and that now he is to kind of cut and run here, because the contract for Travis being at this ranch of the Sixes is now up. And that now Jimmy is going to possibly have to go back to Yellowstone and go back and work for them. And but still, like, Jimmy and Travis are just kind of reminiscing. And so Jimmy is mentioning how, like, man, what you're doing out there is just like beautiful. And Travis is like, well, hey, it's just showing off. Like, we end up having Jimmy, who kind of re-references like his time here, and how he mentions that the one guy was to tell him that like you're a cowboy without an audience, and but this time like you end up having this like crowd here and people are watching on and so on and so forth. So but we have Travis that is to go on and have Jimmy come and see this one horse that is to go on and kind of win the day. And this horse, I guess, is to have a reference to the 1883 show. I guess there's something there about this horse, I guess, that is to be of that show. And like this horse is to have a name for itself and so on and so forth. So, heaven forbid I know the horse's name, but like there's too much to freaking remember anyways with the show. I heaven forbid I know a horse's name out of everything else, but I can memorize certain lines eventually. So Jimmy is going off to Emily and telling her, "Hey, like my contract's up. I'm gonna possibly have to leave here. Like I want to live up to my arrangement or my agreement with John Dutton, but I want to stay here. Like I want to be with you." And Emily's just like, well, let's rip this band-aid off right here now. And so they end up kissing one another and they end up leaving. But Jimmy comes back, is knocking on her door and is saying like, hey, I don't want to leave. Like I want to like stay with you. And Emily's just like, well, wait for me or or go down the ranch down the road. And he's like, dude, that's like 30 miles down the road. Like that, no, like, ugh. Like, so really the promise that Jimmy is to really go on with this girl is like, hey, we're going to freaking make it work somehow. And Jimmy is going to want to try and move mountains to try to make this work. And we'll see how it works or if it works, yada, yada, yada. So, but I was like, well, that's nice that like Jimmy is to like he really found a place that he loves what he's doing, and he's also doing someone. Oh God, I'm sorry about Emily. Like, but it's true. He's doing somebody. He's being with somebody. That's what really matters. So, oh, anyways, pushing on. It's nice to see a character uh, who kind of had to just be kind of like chucked uh, like into no man's land and just be like, I don't know anybody here, to eventually like quickly still find friends here and eventually find a partner, so to speak. So now that that technically is all covered with, technically, as I question myself, we let's cover the John stuff because I think mostly that ties into everything else for this episode. So we go on and have John, who of course is meeting up with Carter, and like, hey, you're still the first one here, right? Like every single episode, it's always the same question. Like, hey, you're the first one here, right? And we have Carter who's like, yeah. Like it'll be kind of weird whatever they do with Carter if he just continues to be this kid who consistently just does this job or something ends up happening to him. It'll be weird to not have Carter be like the first one here every day and still have that story. But I kind of want them to do a little bit more with Carter. Like I want to see like some kind of character progression but I feel like they're kind of mixing him in well, and I can be happy about that. So I can be okay with things. No, don't be okay. Don't be okay with anything. So we have John asking Carter, it's like, hey, like have you ridden a horse yet? And it's like, no, the only thing that he has learned to do is saddle a horse. and all the stuff that has to come with that. So John is teaching Carter how to ride a horse, and Carter is just like smacking his balls against the freaking horse, and so he's like, oh, and so John is telling him it's like you have to like bounce with the horse. I'm like, man, this is another really cool like breaking down of just like a common thing that is like done so always so easily with all these characters, but it's like here's how they do it. Like I like that. I like how they kind of have to um, break a new character, so to speak, and kind of like show them the ropes and show them how complicated everything is. And so, like, I like that because this is a complicated job. This is a complicated thing to do, and so like they make it seem effortless, but it's not effortless. It's a challenge to do everything. Because we go on, we have simply like horseback riding. You end up having to kind of bounce with the horse, kind of like bouncing back and forth, and like they showcase it here, and so eventually, it seems that Carter is going to get a workout on his legs instead of workout on his balls. And so we have them riding off. And so they go and they tie their horses to a tree. And then John is going on and explaining this Buffalo Valley. And again, I'm like, this feels like weirdly like Dances with Wolves. And but people could correct me if this feels inaccurate, but I feel like it's a Dances with Wolves kind of. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, um, but I remember Dances with Wolves where they're like at some point eating like buffalo meat and just kind of. And I remember like them going on and like I think Kevin Costner was like the military guy, and the Native Americans were. Of course, like teaching Kevin Costner's character how to eventually blend in with them and eventually almost be one of them at some point. So it was kind of like a Last Samurai kind of movie. I say that, but like a lot of people like Dances with Wolves is way better than Last Samurai, or some people might have a different opinion about that because like I like culture films. Like I like to have like a person who's kind of out of their element being mixed into something and then having to learn. I love those kinds of movies. Those are really fun to just kind of have a person who has to learn a technique of things. Like that's why I can enjoy a movie like Avatar. It's kind of an oblivious person that is to eventually learn in some ways, a secondary way of living, language, and whatever. So we go on here and have John explaining the Buffalo Valley and how eventually the Native Americans were to eventually uh, lose their land and be pushed out. And we had Carter who was asking, it's like, well, like there isn't any buffalo here. And it's not because of the buffalo, it's because of the story. So is why they're really here. So we have John explaining this whole story, and it's all well and just kind of like the hardships and whatever. Like that's what I kind of liked about Monica, where she was to be mentioning some history and some hardships and whatever. I liked that with which what Monica was doing. But I guess now John is trying to do that now, and that's the thing that I like. There's some things that I can enjoy about this show, and I think that's really one of them. So, and I kind of fast tracked through that story and didn't say the whole thing or whatever. I just kind of said the meat and potatoes, the main story of it. So, speaking of John, we go on and we are to eventually find when John is to make his way back to the house. We have an exchange, I think, between John and Beth. And because in the early, I think this, we have Beth and Rip going on, and so Beth is kind of upset with Rip because John had went into that restaurant and had possibly died. And Rip is like, well, what about me? And Beth is like, you'll be fine. Like, you're basically bulletproof. But, like, John, like, because Beth is kind of, like, fighting for her life for this ranch. And when John dies, she'll have been fighting for so long for nothing. Because if John is willing to easily give up his life and to die on some random thing of a day of a whatever that isn't of a natural cause, then Beth is kind of ticked because it's like, dude, like, I'm fighting for your Alamo over here and I'm putting all of my energy into fighting for this, and you're just going to disappear one day. And then, like, why have I continued to fight for this so hard when you're just going to die off anyways? Because you're just racing to get to the coffin, supposedly, is kind of how I metaphorically would say it there. Um, Racing to get to the coffin, that seems like a weird thing. But anyways, so we have Beth just kind of ticked about John, and to where eventually Beth is to go and now confront John about this. So Beth is going on and now, like, telling John, it's like, well, why did you go to this place? Why did you think that you needed to go and cowboy up and go through there and shoot all these people and to possibly have you get shot in the process? Because Beth is going on and said that him being in a coma was like a miracle thing for John, because Beth had to go through and watch John every day just get certain things just sucked out of him and like put into him, and all these kind of hospital things that he had to go through to eventually come back to them. And so Beth is just like, so you're gonna just turn right around and risk your life for the 80th time just because you were made a certain way? Will get remade. Like, change who you are. Like, put your life, for once, like, put your life out of jeopardy, and like maybe live a little bit longer. Because I guess, like, John having that whole summer where he was camping out was really just him finally, like, doing that, finally living a little. Where it seems like now he's turning around and, like, I'm running for I'm running for governor. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And so, but we also turn around and have Beth, who is just frustrated by the fact that John is doing absolutely nothing about who had shot John, who had uh, blew up Beth, and who had shot at Casey. Any of these things. Why isn't John, if he's not having to save all these people and do all this stuff, why isn't he focused on that? Because Beth is now scarred because of that. So John is saying, it's like, well, I know who the guy who did this is. And so, like, there's nothing I can do about it because he's technically in prison. Like, John was going on and wanting to talk to the sheriff, who is now dead, about what had happened there, but he's dead now. There's nothing he can do. So Beth goes on and leaves for the day. John goes on and is to get a phone call that Summer is in prison. Supposedly she's going to get life in prison because all of the things that she has gone on to do over time, that is to starting to just pile up, like battery, assault, and all these kind of collection of things. So John is of course going on and saying like, well, like stay right there, I'll come, I'll come and get you, kind of thing. And he's like, well, I'm sorry I said something like that, that sounded dumb. And he's like, I'll be right there. So John goes off to see Summer, and so Summer is talking coincidentally at the same miraculous time to her attorney. So they're going, of course, and talking about the list of charges. Then the attorney is to go on and leave. John and Summer are talking it out, and Summer is to mention that Beth was to be the one behind all this. And Beth was saying, like, hey, take one for the team. And Summer's like, well, hey, like, where is the team now? Like, where are these people that are supposed to be behind me after I'm going to and doing all this? And now I'm spending possibly going to be like 30 years in prison. And John is going to be the last guy that I slept with. And John is like, well, hey, just beat down my ego. And Summer's like, that's not what I meant. Like, it's just the fact that, like, this girl has to realize, like, what is the last, like, the decisions that she has ever made. So John is trying to figure something out, that he probably has a judge in his pocket that owes him a favor. And so John is going and talking to this attorney to say, like, well, I'm probably going to be going and talking to a judge sometime soon. And the attorney's just like, well, that's probably going to make things worse. And John is just like, well, like, might as well just see. Might as well just see if that will work out. So, but we also have John that is ticked at Beth at this point. So, we have Beth and Rip and Carter, who are all at this dinner table that is not the dining table, because they went and, I guess, had their own table. I think it's really just because of that simple story of, like, Rip saying, it's like, well, hey, like, we don't have to eat at that table. We can eat at any freaking table. Here's a coffee table. Let's eat there. So we go on and we have John, who's forcing Beth to sit next to the dinner table and not eating anything. And I'm gonna get to the Garrett and John stuff, but we'll get to that. So I just want to kind of focus on this because it seems like this is the big meat of something, and then I'll go and I'll mention the John and Garrett story because that'll tie into the Jamie story and that'll work perfectly. So let's. John, of course, is to confront Beth about the whole like summer thing, and Beth is to go on and say like, well, like I was trying to take down like market equities, like they're our enemy. And John is just like, well, yeah, but like you kill the wolf, but you protect the sheep. And like Summer was a sheep. And so we have it where like John is also asking Beth here, it's like, well, if I wouldn't have slept with this woman, would you have gone and done this? And Beth's like, I don't care. Like, I don't care about this woman. Like, all I care is, like, the main goal of, like, protecting this family. And obviously, Summer is not one of those. Summer is not one of those people. So we'll see where her where things are going to happen for Summer here. And so, but John is going on and telling Beth, it's like, well, like maybe you should just like not be living here right now. Like maybe you need to go on and live somewhere else. So Beth is like, "Are you seriously kicking me out of here?" And he's like, "Yeah." So Beth is going on and grabbing Walker to have Walker go and play her some sad song because Beth needs to cry right now. Rip and Carter are going and playing a quite a bit of poker with all the guys. Seems that Carter is doing pretty dang well, and it also might seem that Carter is to have some cards up his sleeve because Carter is to have the exact same hand that he did in the last game, and people are calling him out on him like, "Hey, are you cheating over there?" It's kind of funny. And so Rip was going on and like kind of like helping Carter at some point, just kind of showing the hand and having some fun. And so all of a sudden we have this really just like, oh my god kind of moment where we have Rip going and opening the door to eventually see Walker and Beth kind of doing what they're doing, and Rip is like, So I wonder what's going to happen next. Like, what vicious thing is going to happen next? Like, what is Rip going to do? How far is this going to go? And that would be a really, like, if they could focus on that for the last episode, I will be satisfied. If that was the main focus on the next episode. So, John is going to some diner to all of a sudden bump into Garrett, who Garrett is on his way to separate himself technically from Jamie for a little bit to kind of let things technically cool down. But I'll talk about that when we get into the Jamie story. So, when John and Garrett are kind of talking here, we have Garrett who's mentioning about his time in jail, where technically John had put him there, and that Garrett had no real like solace or any way of which to really stay sane, besides having a bird from time to time that it was to approach near his prison, and so we also have it where Garrett was to say that it was technically John that was to make Garrett's wife the way she was. And John was like, no, like if anything, you made your wife the way she was. And if anything, like I took care of your son and like I raised him as if he was my own. And we also have John who's thinking that Jamie had nothing to do with what had gone on with the militia. But we really have it where we're not knowing the whole story here. And I wish kind of Garrett would have just said something to John right here and now, but like it's kind of in a public place. But still, like I wish that Garrett would have just said, like, yeah, I was the one who killed, who sent people out to kill you. But just as that kind of like, because John is kind of telling Garrett, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm going to put you in the ground probably sometime soon anyways. It kind of has that feeling. It kind of has that approach to it. So, but we go on and have the this exchange here, and John is to give Garrett this Salisbury steak and say that it's the best in Montana, and but he kind of threatens his life a bit, and so like it's kind of an interesting exchange here. But let's move on to the Jamie stuff, and let's move on to wrapping up this episode. Hopefully I covered everything as I tilt my head and I have the thought process of like, well, I kind of have covered a lot of stuff. But anyways, let's go on to, uh, of course, Jamie. Jamie's going on and watching as Dutton again. Like Jamie has technically already seen this, but now like we just have certain coverages and stuff being reshown here. So we have Jamie who's just like God, uh, like he is just like the hero of this story kind of thing. And so Christina is kind of twisting John's words, and Christina's saying like, you know what? Here's the thing. John is to mention that he is to be the guy that's to be the wall that progress goes against, and that he will never he will never lose. How about you go on and be the face of progress? You'll be the face of change. You'll be uh, the person that isn't living up to some stereotypical candidate that your father technically is for this town, being the stereotypical, uh, I guess, Montana guy. I guess that's the technically the show's words, not mine. No offense to Montana or anybody that lives there. I, I I've seen a lot of places. Montana may not be one of them, but I've seen a lot of places. Like I've lived in both northern and southern states. So no offense to Montana. Let's say that. So what the show says. So Christina is to go on and is to say that Jamie should run for governor because he only needs certain states. And so we also have Christina who's saying it's like, well, yeah, you should also say that John isn't your father and present Garrett as your dad. So that we can have that kind of shift here. And Jamie's like, I don't know if we really want to do that because technically Garrett is to have been charged for murder at one point, but he had served his sentence. And so uh, Christina's like, well, I didn't know that. And then also we have Jamie who's to make Christina like aware of just kind of a number of things. And so Christina's like, good God, like, so Christina is to go on and think that, well, maybe it should be the fact that maybe Garrett should not be in your life right now. And so that way you can go on and go and go for this candidacy without that kind of weight weighing you down kind of thing. Because Jamie and Christina are kind of walking off to the side, and like Jamie's telling like Garrett, it's like, well, hey, we're gonna go here and do some kind of like powwow talking. Garrett's like, uh-huh, like, so like, hey, we're gonna talk about you behind your back, basically. So Jamie and Garrett kind of talk it out, and so Garrett's like, well, hey, if you need me to leave, uh, like for right now to eventually get you this position, this whatever, like, hey, I'm be glad to do that if that helps you. But it's like, man, like Garrett put like technically when we have Garrett being honest, like Garrett did a lot of work to get Jamie to this point, and now he won't like be there to eventually see it through kind of thing. Like we have it where it's kind of like the magician kind of thing where or it's like the Prestige when Hugh Jackman would go and have this like double and he would go on to do this trick and all of a sudden the double would get the applause and Hugh Jackman would go and be at the kind of the underground part of the stage and just be kind of hearing the applause, but he wouldn't be there to actually go and just kind of like, yeah, kind of thing. So we go on and have that kind of thing presented here. So like that for the most point is to cover most of this episode. Probably not everything is covered because time and whatever. But also I'm gonna get the heck out of here because I'm almost getting to the point of episode time. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody. Hopefully I covered everything. I probably didn't cover much of the John and Bill stuff, the new deputy sheriff, where we have Bill kind of going on and talking about how laws are much more enforced now, and John is like, oh, so that way the new deputy sheriff can sleep at night. And how I guess like the deputy sheriff is really cracking down Bill. So we also had that one moment where John and Summer were going on and talking about I know I was going somewhere with this, but immediately once I got to this point, I was like, huh? There was a lot of exchanges there, and there was something about I don't think anything really left there is really all that important enough. So yeah, let's leave that the way it is. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.